The story of Roman entertainment begins not in the grand amphitheaters or the roar of the crowd at gladiatorial games, but in the humble and sacred rituals of early Rome. Festivals, originally steeped in religious observance, were designed to honor the gods, celebrate seasonal changes, or mark significant events in the civic calendar. These early gatherings were largely ceremonial, featuring prayers, offerings, feasts, and processions that brought the community together. However, as Rome grew from a small city-state into a sprawling empire, these seemingly innocent gatherings evolved into events that reflected the society's increasing appetite for spectacle and control. At the heart of early Roman entertainment was the concept of munera, which were public works or services provided by wealthy citizens to benefit the people. Originally, the term munera referred to funeral games offered in honor of the dead, particularly those of prominent families. One of the earliest known examples of these games dates back to 264 BCE, when Decimus Junius Brutus Scaeva hosted a funeral for his father. Historical records suggest that he presented 3 pairs of gladiators in combat, a gesture meant both to honor the deceased and to demonstrate his own wealth and status. From these modest beginnings, the practice of staging gladiatorial combat gradually transformed into a central feature of Roman public life, evolving from solemn rituals into spectacles designed to awe, entertain, and even terrify. The transformation of Roman festivals into large-scale public spectacles was closely tied to the growth of the city and the expansion of political power. As Rome's population increased, so did the need for mass entertainment that could occupy, distract, and appease the populace. Leaders quickly recognized that well-staged games served a dual purpose. They were a form of public amusement, and they were an instrument of social control. By providing entertainment, magistrates and emperors could curry favor with citizens, maintain political loyalty, and assert their dominance. The thrill of the crowd, the excitement, fear, and adrenaline was a powerful tool in shaping the public's perception of authority and influence. Early Roman entertainment was not yet the bloody spectacle that would later become synonymous with the Colosseum and gladiatorial combat. Festivals included theatrical performances, athletic contests, mock battles, and chariot races. Theater in particular was an integral part of these celebrations, with actors performing comedies and tragedies in open-air venues. These performances were often infused with social commentary, satire, and moral lessons, reflecting the values, struggles, and absurdities of Roman life. Athletic competitions, meanwhile, tested strength, skill, and endurance, emphasizing ideals of discipline, courage, and physical prowess. Even these early contests had an edge of danger, as injuries were not uncommon, foreshadowing the more lethal spectacles that were to come. The shift from ceremonial games to gladiatorial contests was gradual but inevitable, driven by a combination of cultural influences, social pressures, and political ambition. Rome's encounters with neighboring cultures, particularly the Etruscans and the Greeks, played a significant role in shaping the appetite for more elaborate and violent forms of entertainment. The Etruscans, who inhabited the Italian peninsula before Rome's rise, were known for their ritualized combat and games. They introduced the practice of pairing fighters in ceremonial battles, often linked to funerary rites. Meanwhile, Greek athletic traditions, which emphasized competition and physical excellence, influenced Roman society's fascination with spectacle and public display. These combined influences helped to lay the groundwork for a uniquely Roman form of entertainment that merged ceremony, athleticism, and cruelty. As the appetite for spectacle grew, so too did the scale and ambition of the events. Early games were intimate affairs, attended primarily by local citizens and the elite, but by the late Republic they had expanded into city-wide extravaganzas that drew thousands of spectators. Public squares and temporary arenas were replaced by permanent structures capable of accommodating massive audiences. These venues became stages for increasingly complex and dangerous performances. Gladiatorial combat, once a solemn tribute, evolved into a public test of life and death, combining athletic skill, theatricality, and raw violence. The audience's role shifted as well, from passive observers to active participants whose cheers, gasps, and verdicts could determine a combatant's fate. The stakes were no longer symbolic, they were literal life-or-death confrontations. The transformation of Roman entertainment also mirrored broader social and economic changes. Rome's growing wealth, fueled by conquest and trade, created a class of elites eager to display their power through public generosity. Hosting games was a way to assert prestige, influence public opinion, and cement one's place in the political hierarchy. Simultaneously, the urban population, often poor and disenfranchised, demanded more extreme forms of amusement. The spectacle became a social equalizer in a sense. Everyone, from senator to slave, could gather in the arena to witness the same drama unfold. The games offered an outlet for societal tensions, providing a controlled environment where violence, competition, and emotion could be safely and entertainingly expressed. The cultural shift toward increasingly brutal entertainment was also linked to Rome's militaristic values. The empire's identity was built on conquest, discipline, and martial prowess. Gladiatorial combat, with its strict rules, hierarchies, and displays of courage, reflected these ideals. The arena became a microcosm of Roman society, a place where strength, strategy, and endurance were celebrated, and weakness was punished. The public's fascination with combat mirrored the empire's own militaristic ambitions, creating a feedback loop in which violence was normalized, glorified, and ritualized. Over time, this normalization allowed for more extreme spectacles as audiences became desensitized and organizers sought ever more sensational displays to capture attention. By the time of the late Republic and early Empire, Roman entertainment had fully transformed from its modest origins into a complex, multifaceted system of public spectacle. Festivals were no longer simply ceremonial, they were performances of power, tools of social cohesion, and stages for the ultimate tests of human endurance and cruelty. What began as a ritual to honor the dead had become a living, breathing theater of life and death, setting the stage for the infamous spectacles that would define Rome for centuries. The birth of Roman entertainment, therefore, was not merely a cultural evolution, it was a reflection of the empire itself, a society increasingly obsessed with spectacle, power, and the human capacity for both awe and horror in the minds of modern audiences. Gladiators are the quintessential symbols of ANC. Roman entertainment, figures of raw physical power, courage, and the macabre allure of combat. Yet behind the spectacle of the arena lay a far darker reality. Gladiators were rarely free men. They were slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, trained and exploited for public amusement. Even those who volunteered for the arena, drawn by the promise of fame, glory, or wealth, often found themselves trapped in a brutal system where survival was never guaranteed. Understanding the lives of these fighters is essential to comprehending the true human cost of Rome's obsession with spectacle and the machinery of death that underpinned it. The term gladiator derives from the Latin word gladius, meaning sword, a fitting etymology for men whose lives revolved around combat. Most gladiators began life as slaves, captured during Rome's many conquests across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Others were criminals condemned to the arena as punishment for serious offenses, while a smaller number were volunteers, drawn by the promise of glory, prize money, or social recognition. Regardless of origin, once enrolled in a ludus, the gladiator school, a man's freedom and identity were largely stripped away. He became property of the lanista, the manager of gladiators, and his value was measured in his fighting ability and entertainment potential rather than his humanity. Training in a gladiator school was rigorous, systematic, and unforgiving. Schools were highly organized institutions with strict hierarchies, rigorous schedules, and harsh discipline. Recruits learned multiple forms of combat, mastering a variety of weapons, such as the gladius, short sword, trident, net, spear, or even heavier polearms. Each gladiator was often trained to specialize in a particular combat style designed to maximize theatricality and audience appeal. For instance, the retiarius, lie. Artly armored and wielding a net and trident, would be matched against the heavily armored Murmillo, creating a contrast in speed, agility and strength that heightened the drama of the fight. This careful choreography ensured that battles were as visually compelling as they were deadly, blending athleticism with the elements of theatre. Despite the organized training and skill development, the life of a gladiator was fundamentally one of violence, danger, and exploitation. They lived in confined barracks within the schools, under the constant watch of instructors who enforced discipline with strict punishment. Injuries were commonplace, and medical care, while sometimes sophisticated for the era, was primarily intended to maintain a gladiator's fighting ability rather than to protect his long-term health. Gladiators were commodities, assets to be protected, yet expendable if their performance faltered or if the crowd demanded blood. The psychological toll was immense. Gladiators had to reconcile the need to survive with the expectation of death as entertainment, often witnessing friends or rivals fall in the arena, only to step back into combat themselves. The paradox of gladiatorial life lay in the duality of their status. On one hand, they were reviled as property, slaves, and potential victims of the arena's lethal spectacle. On the other hand, they were celebrated as heroes, admired for their skill, bravery, and ability to survive against overwhelming odds. Successful gladiators could achieve fame comparable to modern sports stars, with crowds chanting their names, commissioning statues, and even bestowing gifts or women's admiration upon them. Some became living legends, their exploits immortalized in graffiti, coins, and public inscriptions. This fame, however, came at the cost of perpetual danger and the knowledge that each fight could be their last. In this way, the gladiator embodied the contradictions of Roman society, simultaneously revered and dehumanized, heroic and expendable. The hierarchy within the gladiatorial system was also complex. Gladiators were classified by type, based on their combat style, weapons, and armor. The secutor, heavily armored and designed to counter the agility of the retiarius, often became the archetypal gladiator in the popular imagination. Others, such as the Thrakes or Hoplomachus, drew inspiration from the enemies Rome had conquered, creating a form of staged ethnographic violence where the audience could watch a symbolic battle against foreign others. This categorization was not only functional for combat, but also theatrical, heightening the sense of drama and danger for the crowd. It also allowed organizers to manipulate matchups, ensuring that no fight was truly one-sided and that the narrative of struggle and suspense was maintained throughout the games. Gladiators' lives were dictated not only by the lanista, but also by the whims of the public and the editor of the games, typically a wealthy magistrate or emperor. The final judgment in combat often rested in the hands of the audience or the editor, who could signal mercy or death with subtle gestures, the infamous thumbs up or thumbs down. Gestures, though popularly misinterpreted today, symbolized the crowd's power to decide the fate of a combatant. This ritualized audience participation reinforced the sense that the gladiator's life was entertainment, a performance for public approval. Survival in the arena required not only skill and courage, but also an understanding of spectacle, timing, and audience psychology, a deadly blend of art and mortality. Despite the inherent risks, some gladiators accumulated wealth, social recognition, and even opportunities for freedom. A particularly skilled or popular fighter could be granted a rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing retirement and liberation from the arena. However, freedom did not guarantee security. Many retired gladiators faced societal stigma, economic hardship, or the lingering psychological trauma of repeated exposure to violence. The allure of fame and the potential for financial reward often came at an unbearable personal cost. For the vast majority, however, life as a gladiator was marked by fear, pain, and a relentless struggle for survival. The role of women in gladiatorial culture, though less prominent, adds another layer of complexity. Female gladiators, known as gladiatrices, were rare but not unheard of. They fought in specially arranged bouts, often as novelties to entertain the audience. Their existence challenges modern assumptions about gender in ancient Rome, highlighting the extent to which spectacle could override societal norms. Like their male counterparts, female fighters were both admired and exploited, their lives manipulated to serve the appetites of the public. Ultimately, gladiators were more than entertainers. They were instruments of a social and political system that thrived on spectacle, fear, and control. Their lives were meticulously orchestrated, their deaths celebrated, and their stories immortalized as warnings, triumphs, and myths. The gladiators' arena was both a stage and a crucible, reflecting the values, obsessions, and contradictions of Roman civilization. Through their courage, skill, and suffering, gladiators left an enduring legacy, demonstrating the extremes of human endurance and the dark allure of violence as entertainment. By examining the lives of gladiators, it becomes clear that Rome's obsession with spectacle was never purely recreational. It was a societal mechanism designed to entertain, impress, and control. Gladiators were the ultimate tools of this system, embodying both the glory and the cruelty of the empire. They were heroes in the eyes of the crowd, slaves in the eyes of their masters, and ultimately, victims of a culture that valued performance over humanity. In understanding their lives, we gain insight not only into the mechanics of Roman entertainment, but also into the darker impulses of human fascination with death and spectacle. Impulses that would push the empire to ever greater extremes in its pursuit of awe, terror, and blood-soaked glory. No symbol of ancient Rome captures the grandeur, ambition, and brutality of the empire, quite like the Colosseum. Known originally as the Flavian Amphitheatre, it stood not merely as a venue for entertainment, but as a monumental testament to Roman engineering, political power, and the empire's appetite for spectacle. Completed in 80 CE under Emperor Titus, the Colosseum was designed to impress, intimidate, and control the Roman populace. It became the epicenter of gladiatorial combat, public executions, and the dramatic display of human and animal suffering. A carefully orchestrated stage where death, terror, and awe were interwoven into one overwhelming experience. From the outside, the Colosseum was a marvel of architecture. Its elliptical shape, measuring approximately 189 meters long and 156 meters wide, allowed for unobstructed views from every angle, ensuring that tens of thousands of spectators could watch the action unfold. The amphitheater could accommodate an estimated 50,000 to 80,000 people, with tiered seating arranged to reflect social hierarchy. Senators and the elite occupied the prime vantage points close to the arena floor, while ordinary citizens, women, and slaves were relegated to higher tiers. This deliberate spatial arrangement reinforced social order, making the act of witnessing violence a communal yet socially stratified experience. Spectacle in Rome was not just entertainment, it was a social lesson. Beneath the Colosseum's polished marble floors lay the Hypogeum, a two-level underground labyrinth of tunnels, cages, and trapdoors. This subterranean complex was the true heart of the arena, where animals, gladiators, and stage machinery awaited their moment of entrance. The Hypogeum was an engineering marvel, featuring hoists, pulleys, and elevators capable of launching lions, tigers, and other wild beasts into the arena in dramatic fashion. Gladiators could also appear seemingly from nowhere, adding to the theatricality of combat. The hidden infrastructure allowed organizers to manipulate surprise, suspense, and terror, creating an environment where the audience's sense of unpredictability was as intense as the spectacle itself. The Colosseum's architecture was purposefully designed to maximize both safety for spectators and danger for participants. The arena floor was a wooden platform covered with sand, a material that absorbed blood and prevented excessive slipping, while also providing a neutral backdrop to enhance the visibility of the fight. Beneath this floor, animals were kept in cages ready to be released, sometimes into elaborate set pieces that recreated forests, rivers, or battlefield conditions. These staged environments turned the arena into a theatrical landscape, merging elements of drama, naturalism, and brutality. The Roman audience did not merely watch. They were immersed in a sensory spectacle where sound, movement, and blood combined to produce a visceral experience. The Colosseum was also equipped with mechanisms to control the crowd. Its multiple entrances and exits allowed tens of thousands of people to enter and exit efficiently, minimizing disorder while ensuring that no seat was out of sight. Velaria, the massive retractable awnings, shielded spectators from the sun and elements, ensuring their comfort even as the combatants endured mortal danger. These architectural features reveal that the Colosseum was not simply about showcasing violence, it was about staging violence in a way that maximized audience engagement, creating a tension-filled experience that alternated between exhilaration, fear, and awe. The spectators were participants in the spectacle, their reactions orchestrated by the careful interplay of design, timing, and cruelty. One of the most chilling aspects of the Colosseum was its ability to turn the natural world into an instrument of terror. Exotic animals were brought from the far reaches of the empire, lions from Africa, tigers from India, elephants from distant lands, and confined in the hypogeum until their moment of display. Once released, these creatures could attack both humans and each other, creating chaos and spectacle. The juxtaposition of trained gladiators and wild beasts emphasized human courage and resilience, but it also underscored Rome's dominion over both men and nature. Every roar, every sudden appearance was meticulously choreographed to elicit fear and admiration, demonstrating the empire's power over life itself. The Colosseum's role extended beyond gladiatorial combat to include elaborate public executions and reenactments of historical bat. Condemned criminals, political prisoners, and captives from conquered territories were often executed in staged performances designed to educate, entertain, and intimidate. These events were theatrical in scale. Naval battles, or naumachii, were sometimes staged on the arena floor by flooding it with water, allowing ships to clash in miniature reenactments of historical victories. The line between education, spectacle, and cruelty was blurred, making the Colosseum a versatile instrument of both civic pride and psychological control. It was a place where the public could witness the consequences of disobedience, the cost of war, and the emperor's largesse, all under the guise of entertainment. The psychological impact on both participants and spectators cannot be overstated. For gladiators, the arena represented a deadly stage where every movement, every strike, and every decision could mean life or death. The audience's cheers and jeers were not mere background noise. They were a force that could influence the outcome, sway the judgment of referees, and heighten the pressure on the combatants. The architecture of the Colosseum amplified this tension. The towering walls and tightly packed seating created an echo chamber for sound, making every roar of approval or condemnation resound through the arena. Visibility, sound, and staging combined to create a theater where the human drama of survival unfolded on an epic scale. Moreover, the Colosseum reflected the political ambitions of Rome's emperors. Constructed during the Flavian dynasty, it was a symbol of imperial power and generosity. Emperors used the amphitheater to curry favor with the masses, distract the populace from political issues, and assert dominance over both citizens and conquered peoples. Hosting grand games, filled with exotic animals, naval battles, and mass executions, was a statement of wealth, engineering prowess, and control. The scale and sophistication of the Colosseum's design made it a tool of propaganda as much as entertainment, illustrating the lengths to which rulers would go to manipulate public perception through spectacle. In addition to its physical and political functions, the Colosseum became a cultural symbol of Rome's obsession with violence and spectacle. It set standards for future arenas, influencing entertainment practices across the empire and leaving an indelible mark on Western consciousness. The building itself, with its arches, corridors, and hypogeum, embodied the fusion of artistry, engineering, and cruelty that defined Roman public spectacles. Its ruins, still standing today, serve as haunting reminders of an empire that celebrated human suffering as both theater and triumph. Ultimately, the Colosseum was far more than a venue. It was a meticulously designed machine of death and entertainment. Its architecture transformed violence into performance, danger into spectacle, and death into drama. It allowed the Roman populace to experience fear, awe, and excitement from a safe distance, while ensuring that the participants, gladiators, prisoners, and animals, bore the full cost of the entertainment. By combining engineering ingenuity, theatrical staging, and psychological manipulation, the Colosseum exemplified the extremes of Roman ingenuity and cruelty, setting the stage for the most brutal and inhumane spectacles the empire would ever witness. It was a monument not only to Roman power, but also to the darker impulses of a civilization that found art, drama, and societal cohesion in orchestrated death. The Roman appetite for spectacle did not end with human combat. The empire's vast reach allowed it to exploit the natural world in ways that were as awe-inspiring as they were horrifying. Exotic animals, captured from the far corners of Rome's territories, became central to the entertainment of the arena, serving as both instruments of terror and symbols of imperial power. Lions, tigers, elephants, leopards, crocodiles, bears, and even rhinoceroses were imported from Africa, India, and beyond, transported thousands of miles to fight humans, each other, or to serve as living props in meticulously staged spectacles. The presence of these creatures turned the Colosseum and other arenas into arenas of unpredictable danger, a place where man's dominion over nature was dramatized for maximum public effect. The logistical challenges of capturing, transporting, and housing these animals were immense, highlighting the lengths to which Rome would go to ensure a dramatic spectacle. Roman officials employed hunters, traders, and local auxiliaries to track and capture wild animals alive, a dangerous endeavor that often resulted in high mortality rates among both captors and captives. Once captured, the animals were transported on ships, often in cramped, brutal conditions, without adequate food, water, or ventilation. Many animals perished during the journey, and those that survived were weakened, disoriented, and subjected to further stress upon arrival. Yet their suffering mattered little. What mattered was their dramatic appearance in the arena, where their exoticism, size, and ferocity captivated Roman audiences. In the arena, these animals were used in a variety of ways. One common form of spectacle was the venatio, or wild beast hunt, in which trained hunters or lightly armed gladiators faced off against the animals in a controlled but perilous environment. These hunts were choreographed to maximize suspense and danger. The placement of hidden pits, obstacles, and trapdoors allowed the organizers to manipulate the animals' movements, creating dramatic confrontations and unexpected twists. Lions and tigers, leaping from concealed cages, could charge at humans or each other, eliciting gasps and cheers from the crowd. The unpredictability of live animals ensured that every performance carried a genuine risk of injury or death, heightening the spectacle's intensity. Some spectacles escalated to extreme cruelty, emphasizing the arena as a place of punishment as much as entertainment. Condemned criminals were often thrown to beasts as a form of execution, known as damnatio ad bestias. These events were designed not only to punish but to terrify, sending a powerful message to spectators about the consequences of criminal behavior or rebellion. The condemned faced an almost certain death against predators far more powerful than themselves. The juxtaposition of human vulnerability and animal ferocity created a chilling tableau, the raw, untamed violence of nature made manifest, yet fully under the control of Roman authority. These executions became a ritualized component of public games, blending punishment, spectacle, and propaganda in ways that underscored Rome's dominion over both men and the natural world. Beyond the venations and executions, animals were used to create elaborate theatrical reenactments of exotic landscapes or historical battles. Organizers would construct temporary forests, rivers, or even miniature cities within the arena, releasing animals to simulate wilderness or to recreate the chaos of battle. Elephants, for example, could be staged to mimic enemy armies, while crocodiles could represent distant, dangerous lands. These performances combined education, drama, and fear, turning the arena into a living diorama of empire and conquest. The exotic animals were not mere props. They were living symbols of Rome's reach and power, demonstrating to the populace that the empire could command forces both human and natural. The presence of exotic animals in the arena also had profound psychological effects on the audience. For many spectators, these creatures were completely unfamiliar and terrifying, representing distant lands and peoples beyond the boundaries of the known world. Lions, tigers, and elephants were not only dangerous, they were awe-inspiring, majestic, and unpredictable. The thrill of seeing such beasts killed or subdued in the arena reinforced a sense of control over the natural world, while also satisfying the Roman fascination with death, danger, and dominance. The interplay of fear and fascination heightened the emotional intensity of the games, ensuring that every roar, leap, and charge elicited a visceral response from the crowd. The use of exotic animals in Roman spectacles also reflected broader themes of empire and conquest. By displaying creatures from distant lands, the organizers of the games emphasized Rome's reach and supremacy. Every imported animal was a trophy of conquest, a living testament to Rome's ability to dominate foreign territories and extract resources for its own amusement. The spectacle reinforced the empire's narrative of power. Not only had Rome conquered human populations, but it had brought the very forces of nature under its control. The animals themselves became symbols of imperial ambition, their presence in the arena a tangible representation of Rome's authority over both people and the natural world. The scale of these spectacles could be staggering. Some accounts suggest that thousands of animals were killed during a single set of games, with entire sections of the Colosseum's underground chambers dedicated to housing and releasing them. Organizers would sometimes pair humans against multiple animals simultaneously, increasing the risk and the drama. Other events pitted different species against each other, such as lions versus bears or elephants versus rhinoceroses, turning the arena into a theater of animal bloodshed. These extreme spectacles tested the limits of Roman cruelty and ingenuity, pushing both participants and animals to the brink for the entertainment of the masses. Despite the fascination and thrill, these spectacles had lasting consequences for the animals themselves and for the empire's image of nature. Many species were driven to near extinction in certain regions due to overhunting for arena games. The emphasis on exoticism and rarity created a demand for increasingly dangerous or unusual animals, fueling a cycle of capture, transport, and death. Yet for Roman spectators, these consequences were invisible, overshadowed by the spectacle unfolding before them. The arena was a stage where power, fear, and spectacle were interwoven, and the suffering of animals, like that of humans, was subsumed under the triumph of performance. In addition to their role in entertainment and symbolism, animals also served as instruments of moral and political messaging. Emperors used wild beast spectacles to demonstrate generosity, celebrate victories, or distract citizens from social unrest. The cruelty of the animals' treatment reflected the harshness of justice and the inevitability of fate, reinforcing social norms and the authority of the emperor. The spectacle of taming, controlling, or killing exotic creatures was a vivid metaphor for the Roman state's control over life, death, and the natural order. Ultimately, the use of exotic animals in Roman spectacles exemplifies the empire's obsession with combining danger, drama, and domination. The Colosseum and other arenas were transformed into stages where humans confronted not only each other but the raw, untamed forces of nature itself. Lions, tigers, elephants, and other exotic beasts were not simply entertainment. They were symbols of imperial power, tools of psychological manipulation, and instruments of fear. Their presence elevated the spectacle to extremes of cruelty and spectacle that would resonate throughout history, shaping the Roman identity and leaving an enduring legacy of both fascination and horror. By examining the role of exotic animals in the arena, we gain insight into the extremes of Roman spectacle and the empire's manipulation of both humans and nature for entertainment. The venations, executions, and staged battles were more than displays of cruelty. They were deliberate orchestrations of fear, awe, and power. The spectacle of nature's wrath, harnessed and exploited by Roman ingenuity, revealed a society that found thrill and meaning in domination, death, and spectacle. These events were the penultimate stage in the evolution of Roman entertainment, setting the foundation for the most extreme and brutal games the empire would ever produce in ancient Rome. The arena was never just a place of entertainment. It was a stage upon which politics, propaganda, and power were performed as vividly as any gladiatorial combat. Spectacles were carefully orchestrated events designed to reinforce the authority of emperors, magistrates, and elites, demonstrating their wealth, influence, and control over life and death. These public games were a form of political theater in which social, economic, and military power were displayed through orchestrated violence, pageantry, and awe-inspiring spectacle. Understanding this political dimension is essential to comprehending why Roman entertainment often escalated to extremes of cruelty, theatricality, and spectacle. The tradition of using games for political purposes dates back to the Roman Republic. Wealthy magistrates and politicians would sponsor public events as a means of currying favor with the populace, demonstrating their generosity and solidifying their social status. Hosting game was not merely an act of charity, it was a strategic investment in political capital. A magistrate who staged a lavish set of gladiatorial combats, chariot races, or theatrical performances could earn the gratitude and loyalty of citizens, securing votes, alliances, and prestige. In this sense, spectacles were a form of early political marketing, intertwining entertainment with civic obligation and influence. With the rise of the empire, the political function of games became even more pronounced. Emperors recognized that the provision of spectacular events could maintain social order, distract the populace from economic hardship or political unrest, and assert imperial dominance. By controlling the spectacles, emperors could control both perception and emotion, presenting themselves as generous benefactors while simultaneously demonstrating their capacity for authority and punishment. The arena thus became a site where power was not merely declared, it was dramatized with death, danger, and display, reinforcing the social hierarchy and the ruler's supremacy. The scale and extravagance of these events reflected the ambitions of the emperors. Some games lasted days, weeks, or even months, featuring hundreds of gladiators, thousands of animals, and elaborate stagecraft. The inclusion of exotic animals, simulated naval battles, and historical reenactments served not only to entertain but to awe the populace, creating the impression of limitless wealth, organization, and ingenuity. These spectacles were carefully choreographed to elicit admiration, fear, and loyalty, showing that the emperor possessed the resources and intelligence to orchestrate events that defied imagination. The more spectacular the games, the more powerful the emperor appeared in the eyes of his subjects. Spectacles were also a means of reinforcing social and moral hierarchies. By determining who lived and who died in the arena, emperors and editors of games exerted control over both the participants and the audience. Condemned criminals and prisoners of war were often forced to face lions, tigers, or gladiators, turning punishment into a public performance. This dramatized justice reinforced the idea that the emperor and the state held ultimate authority over life and death. Audiences were complicit in this power structure, their cheers and reactions serving to validate the social order. The arena became a microcosm of Roman society, where courage, loyalty, and obedience were rewarded, and defiance or weakness was punished in vivid, unforgettable ways. The psychological impact of these politically charged spectacles was immense. The combination of theatrical staging, exotic animals, and lethal combat created a powerful sensory experience designed to manipulate emotions. Fear, excitement, and awe were not accidental byproducts. They were carefully cultivated. The audience was drawn into a narrative of imperial strength, military conquest, and moral authority, making them participants in the political performance. By engaging the populace on both emotional and intellectual levels, emperors could shape public perception, inspire loyalty, and deter dissent. The arena, in essence, became a theater of influence, where the boundaries between entertainment, morality, and governance were deliberately blurred. Emperors also used spectacles to commemorate victories, celebrate anniversaries, or assert dominance over conquered peoples. Triumphs and games were intertwined, After a successful military campaign, captured prisoners and exotic animals were often paraded through Rome before being thrown into the arena. These displays communicated messages of conquest and dominance, showing that Rome could subdue both human enemies and the forces of nature itself. By framing these events as public celebrations, emperors could reinforce their legitimacy, turning military success into civic theater. The arena thus functioned as both a stage and a symbol, merging personal prestige with imperial ideology. The political utility of spectacles extended beyond the display of power to the management of public unrest. Bread and circuses, as the poet Juvenal famously noted, became a strategy for appeasing the populace. By providing free food, entertainment, and awe-inspiring games, emperors could distract citizens from economic hardship, political instability, or unpopular policies. Spectacles acted as a form of social pacification, channeling potentially disruptive energy into collective excitement and participation. The psychological impact of these events ensured that the populace associated the emperor with generosity, order, and authority, even as the arena's violence reminded them of the consequences of disobedience. The scale of political manipulation through spectacle also drove innovation and excess. Organizers constantly sought new ways to astonish the public, importing rarities from across the empire and devising complex staged events. Gladiators were paired in novel matchups, animals were combined in unpredictable hunts, and elaborate sets recreated distant lands or historic battles. These innovations were not purely artistic. They were calculated strategies to reinforce the emperor's image, impress allies, and intimidate enemies. Every leap of a lion, clash of weapons, and roar of the crowd served as propaganda, reinforcing the emperor's capacity to orchestrate chaos, danger, and triumph simultaneously. Political spectacle also had a long-lasting cultural effect, shaping the Roman understanding of authority and entertainment. By intertwining power with performance, the arena became a model for how leadership could be enacted publicly, dramatized, and consumed collectively. Emperors learned to manage both risk and spectacle, ensuring that their authority was visible yet awe-inspiring, fearsome yet entertaining. The legacy of this approach endured in Roman culture, influencing not only subsequent emperors but also broader societal attitudes toward violence, heroism, and control. Spectacle, in the Roman imagination, became synonymous with power itself. Ultimately, the political dimension of Roman games reveals why the empire's spectacles often escalated into extremes of brutality. The violence, cruelty, and theatricality were not accidental. They were tools of governance, propaganda, and social engineering. Gladiators, exotic animals, and condemned prisoners were instruments in a carefully orchestrated performance, designed to impress, intimidate, and control. Emperors leveraged fear, awe, and excitement to consolidate power, manipulate public opinion, and reinforce societal hierarchies. The arena was a theater, a classroom, and a battlefield, all rolled into one, a place where the spectacle of death served the spectacle of power. By the time of the late Empire, the games had become both tradition and expectation, with political leaders judged by their ability to stage the most extravagant, shocking, and awe-inspiring spectacles. Spectacles were as much about demonstrating personal authority and imperial legitimacy as they were about entertaining the masses. Through calculated cruelty and controlled chaos, Rome's leaders ensured that the populace witnessed, celebrated, and internalized the values of obedience, courage, and reverence for power. In doing so, they created a culture in which the arena was both a site of entertainment and a tool of governance, where the thrill of the crowd and the terror of the spectacle were inseparable from the assertion of authority. The intertwining of politics and entertainment in ancient Rome highlights the depth of the empire's sophistication and its cruelty. Spectacles were not simply frivolous amusements but deliberate instruments of influence, designed to shape public perception, manage social order, and reinforce imperial dominance. From gladiatorial combat to animal hunts and mass executions, every aspect of the games served a political purpose. By analyzing this dimension, we understand that Roman entertainment was never just about blood and spectacle. It was about power, persuasion, and the deliberate orchestration of fear and awe to maintain control over both people and empire.